My hands shook as I held the camera, Marjorie's old Nikon. I'd cleaned it just for today, her lens cap still taped with our son's name in her handwriting, for Michael's graduation. When he finally spotted me across the courtyard, his face dropped. He walked over fast, not with joy, but urgency. "Don't sit with me," he whispered harshly. "I don't want my friends to think you're, like, that kind of dad." Then he turned and walked off. I stood frozen in the crowd, invisible, humiliated. I didn't cry. I just looked down, and realized I didn't know my son anymore. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always a man standing alone in a crowd, clutching memories. There was a time when our house rang with laughter, when Michael's tiny feet would thump down the hallway every morning just to crawl into my lap. He used to say, "Daddy, when I grow up, I'm gonna be just like you." That memory alone could warm me through the coldest winters. After Marjorie passed, it was just him and me. She died too young, taken by a sickness that moved faster than we expected. I still remember the way she looked at Michael from her hospital bed. She took my hand and whispered, "Make sure he knows how loved he is, even when I'm gone." I made that promise. And I kept it, for years. Raising him alone wasn't easy. I worked at the auto shop during the day and delivered papers in the early mornings just to cover tuition and keep food on the table. I stopped buying new clothes for myself and took every extra shift I could. I became good at making a dollar stretch further than it ever should have. But I didn't resent a second of it. Every time he smiled, especially when he got one of those perfect grades or won a spelling bee, I felt like Marjorie was smiling too, through him. Our house was modest, but it was filled with love. I built a small bookshelf in his room with my own hands and lined it with every storybook Marjorie ever read to him. We had a Saturday ritual, pancakes, cartoons, then we'd visit her grave with fresh sunflowers. He used to talk to her like she could still hear him, telling her about school, about his favorite cartoons, even about the girl he liked in 3rd grade. I'd stand quietly behind him, my hand on his shoulder, and think, we're doing okay. When he was 12, I started teaching him how to fix engines. He had little hands but quick eyes. I remember one afternoon when we sat under an old Pontiac, grease covering our arms, and he looked at me and said, "Mom would be proud of you, Dad." I didn't respond. I just tightened a bolt so he wouldn't see my eyes welling up. School was always important to him. He loved learning. I scrimped and saved every penny to make sure he could attend a good private school, even when it meant skipping meals for myself. At the time, it felt worth it, watching him rise, watching him thrive. He made the honor roll every semester. Teachers would shake my hand and say, "You've raised a remarkable young man." I'd nod, too proud to speak sometimes. We didn't have a fancy car or go on vacations. But we had late-night talks on the porch, where he'd ask me questions about the stars, about God, about Mom. I never pretended to have all the answers. I just listened. I always listened. Christmases were quiet but special. Every year, I pulled out the same cracked box of ornaments Marjorie collected over the years. Michael would hang them exactly the way she used to. His favorite was a tiny wooden train she bought the year he was born. He used to say it was like her spirit watched over him when it hung on the tree. He never went without. I made sure of that. New shoes, a clean uniform, hot meals, books, anything he needed. I sold my wedding band once to cover his enrollment deposit for high school. I never told him. I didn't want him to feel guilty. That's just what fathers do. Still, looking back, maybe I should have told him more about how hard it was. Not to guilt him, but to teach him. Maybe if he knew the weight I carried, he wouldn't have been so quick to drop me the moment he didn't need me. There were signs, I suppose. Even then. Moments where he seemed embarrassed when I picked him up in my old truck, or when I came to school events in my faded work clothes. I brushed it off. Kids get awkward with age, I told myself. He's just trying to fit in. I thought it would pass. He never liked showing off our home to his friends. Said it was too small. I remember overhearing him once on the phone, telling someone his dad was a kind of mechanic/janitor. I laughed it off then. But something inside me curled up a little. Still, I believed in the good. In the bond we had built. I told myself that love raised with honesty and sacrifice can't just vanish. And yet, it did. But those early years? They were real. They were full of hope, warmth, love. No matter what came later, I will never let myself forget that once, my son looked up to me like I hung the stars in his sky. The change didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, like rust under paint, slow, silent, and just as destructive. At first, I chalked it up to growing up. Teenagers always pull away from their parents, don't they? That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to believe. It started with the phone calls. Michael used to call me every night when he first started high school. Just to tell me how his day went, or to ask me about a homework question, or just to say goodnight. Then it became every other night. Then once a week. Then, barely at all. Busy, he'd text. Can't talk. Study group. I understood. I wanted him to focus on school. But sometimes I'd call just to hear his voice, only for it to go straight to voicemail. His tone shifted too. Little things. Less, "Hi, Dad," more, "Yeah," when he picked up. Less laughter in his voice. The warmth that used to greet me even through the phone had cooled into something almost managerial. The first time I noticed real distance was during a parent-teacher conference in his junior year. I arrived early, wearing the shirt Marjorie bought me years ago for special occasions. I combed my hair twice, practiced my smile in the rearview mirror. When I walked into the school lobby, Michael was already there with his friends' parents, sleek, polished folks in tailored clothes. I smiled and waved. He saw me. And he looked away. Didn't acknowledge me. Didn't introduce me. Didn't smile. Just turned slightly, so his back was half toward me. That one hurt more than I expected. At dinner afterward, he said I should have worn something less wrinkled. I didn't respond. I just passed him the potatoes and asked about his biology exam. I tried to keep our traditions going, at least for a while. Saturday pancakes. Movie nights. Visiting Marjorie's grave on her birthday. But one by one, those rituals faded into silence. I've got practice. I've got SAT prep. I'm meeting with a tutor. Maybe all of that was true. Or maybe he just didn't want to be seen with me anymore. The house felt emptier each month. His room stayed clean not because he was neat, but because he wasn't there. I stopped setting his plate at dinner. Stopped buying his favorite snacks. Stopped expecting him to come home before 10. One evening, I waited up just to talk. I hadn't seen him properly all week. When he came in, I stood in the hallway and said, "Hey, champ. Can we talk for a second?" He didn't even stop walking. Just said, "Kinda tired, Dad. Long day," and disappeared into his room. Door closed. Light off. The next day, I found a college brochure in the trash. A prestigious school on the other side of the country. He hadn't told me he applied. At first, I was hurt. Then I reminded myself, it was his future. He didn't owe me every detail. But still, the gap between us widened with every mile he planned to put between us. I remember the last birthday we spent together before he left for college. I made his favorite, chicken parmesan from scratch, just like Marjorie used to. He barely touched his plate, scrolling through his phone most of the meal. I handed him a small wrapped box. Inside was a pocket watch I'd saved up for, engraved with, "To Michael, the best parts of me live in you." He looked at it for half a second before muttering, "Cool. Thanks." Then he asked if he could borrow the car to go see his friends. I stood in the kitchen, holding my coffee mug, listening to the door shut behind him. The next morning, I found the watch sitting on the entryway table, forgotten. I tried to give him space. I didn't want to become that father who smothered his kid. I told myself it was just a phase, that he'd come back around. But things only got worse when he started dating that girl, Stephanie. Stephanie was smart, ambitious, beautiful in the way magazines tell you beauty should look. But she had a cold edge to her smile. The first time we met, she looked me up and down like I was something she'd scrape off her shoe. She once asked me, right in my own kitchen, "Did you ever go to college, Mr. Weller?" I said, "No, ma'am. I went straight to work. Had to." She smiled thinly and said, "That's cute. Old school. Old school. Like I was a relic. A museum piece." Michael didn't defend me. He laughed. A short, awkward chuckle that told me everything. From then on, whenever she was around, he barely looked in my direction. Conversations became transactional. Requests. Reminders. Deadlines. "Dad, can you wire some money? Can I get the insurance card? Do you still have my birth certificate?" He needed me, but only in the way a vending machine is needed. I remember one night, lying awake, thinking, where did I go wrong? I raised him with kindness. I gave him everything I had. I didn't drink. I didn't yell. I didn't abandon him. And yet, he was slipping away. And I didn't know how to stop it. Graduation day was supposed to be our victory. His and mine. I had circled the date on the calendar a year ago, wrote it bold in Marjorie's old planner with a note beside it, "Michael finishes strong." She'd be proud. I imagined standing beside him, watching him cross the stage, maybe even shedding a tear. I was wrong. It started with the invitation, or the lack of one. He never sent one. I found out the date from a neighbor whose son attended the same college. I thought it must have been a mistake. Maybe he'd forgotten. Maybe it got lost in the mail. I told myself a lot of things I shouldn't have had to. Still, I went. Bought a new dress shirt, shined my shoes. I even polished the Nikon Marjorie used to carry around her neck. I left early, nervous like I was the one graduating. I remember the breeze that morning, soft and warm like Marjorie whispering, "Go. Be proud." When I arrived at the venue, I looked for my name on the guest list at the reserved family section. It wasn't there. The young man at the table gave me a confused look, then pointed toward the general admission seats on the far end. I took my seat quietly, my hands resting on the camera. I kept my eyes on the graduates filing in, scanning each face. Then I saw him, Michael. Walking tall, polished, confident. My heart swelled. He looked around, and our eyes met. I smiled, waved. He saw me. And then, he looked away. He didn't wave back. He didn't smile. He whispered something to the young woman beside him, Stephanie, and then made his way toward me. I stood up, still smiling, unsure of what was happening. He leaned in, barely audible over the music. "Don't sit with me," he said quickly. "It's better if you just stay over here." I blinked. "What? I thought I'd be." He cut me off. "Just, don't make it weird. I've got friends here. Stephanie's family's here. Please, Dad." He didn't wait for a response. He turned, walked back, adjusted his gown, and stood tall beside the others. I stood there, my heart thudding in my chest. The camera strap slid from my shoulder. I caught it just before it hit the floor. People around me had heard. I could feel it. The silence. The averted eyes. The pity. I sat down slowly and stared at the stage, but I didn't really see anything after that. When they called his name, I didn't cheer. I couldn't. I thought about Marjorie. About the promise I made her. About the nights I stayed awake worrying about how I'd raise a boy without her. And in that moment, I felt like I had failed her. After the ceremony, I waited by the side exit. I hoped he'd at least come say thank you. Or maybe apologize. Or even lie and say it wasn't what it looked like. But he didn't come. I watched from a distance as he posed for photos with Stephanie's parents, smiling, laughing, wrapping his arms around them like family. They handed him a sleek gift box. He hugged her mother. I stood behind a tree, holding my own wrapped gift, an old fountain pen that belonged to Marjorie's father, engraved with the words, "For the man you're becoming." I never gave it to him. On the way home, I didn't cry. I didn't listen to music. I just drove in silence, the car filled with the weight of everything left unsaid. That night, I placed the camera on the kitchen table. I flipped through the photos. Blurry shots. Distant angles. One caught his face mid-laugh, genuine, open, carefree. I stared at it for a long time. That was when I realized, he didn't just forget me. He erased me. And nobody stopped him. Not a single person from the family reached out afterward. Not his uncles. Not even his cousin who I helped through rehab. Everyone seemed to carry on like nothing happened. I became a ghost in my own legacy. I stopped checking the mailbox. I unplugged the landline. I let the house go quiet. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that I still loved him. I still worried if he was eating well, if he was sleeping enough, if he remembered to lock his doors at night. I hated that part of myself. How can a man still care for someone who left him standing alone on the most important day of their lives? But I did. Because that's what fathers do. Even when they're forgotten. A week after the graduation, I found myself cleaning out the garage, one of those long, dusty chores I'd always put off. I figured staying busy might keep my mind from circling the memory like a vulture. But grief has a way of leaking into everything. I found one of Michael's old science projects in a plastic bin, labeled in his neat handwriting, Volcano, Grade 4, for Mom. I sat on the concrete floor for half an hour, just staring at it. That's when I decided I needed to see him. Not to argue. Not to demand anything. Just to try. He hadn't responded to my texts since graduation, so I took the train out to his apartment near the university. I brought the pen. Still wrapped in brown paper, ribbon untouched. When I got there, the building was nicer than I expected. Gated parking. Stone lobby. A young woman at the desk asked who I was visiting. I gave her Michael's name, and she buzzed me through with a distracted nod. I climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator. I needed the time. His door was cracked open. I stopped in the hallway. I heard his voice, Michael's voice, but it was sharper, colder than I remembered. And then I heard Stephanie. They were talking about me. I froze. My instincts told me to knock, to make noise, to stop whatever this was. But my heart told me to listen. He still lives in that old house, right? Stephanie said. Yeah, Michael replied. And he's stubborn. Won't sell it. Won't even think about downsizing. Stephanie laughed. Well, he can't live there forever. Eventually, he'll need care. A nurse. Maybe even a home. I know, Michael said. But once he's out, it's ours. Ours. I felt my stomach turn. He doesn't have a will, she asked. If he does, I haven't seen it, Michael said. But I'm sure I'm the only heir. Everything goes to me by default. That house, his savings, the pension. It's just a matter of time. Stephanie's voice softened, but her words cut deeper. We just have to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid, like giving it away or changing it last minute. Old people get emotional. Then they both laughed. That light, careless kind of laughter that says we've already won. I backed away, down the stairs, out of the building. I didn't knock. I didn't deliver the gift. I couldn't. Outside, I sat on a bench beneath a thin tree and stared at nothing for a long while. So that's what I had become to him, a transaction. A ticking clock. Not a father. Not a man who gave up everything so he could succeed. Just a house. A pension. A name on paper. The betrayal wasn't just in the words. It was in the tone. The ease. The way he didn't hesitate. Like it was already decided. Like I was already gone. The pen dug into my palm as I clutched it inside my coat. I thought of Marjorie. Of the nights we whispered in the dark about our son's future. About how proud she would have been. And I realized, right then, she would have wept. I made my way home in silence. Again. When I reached the house, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked into the study, pulled out the small notebook I kept in my desk drawer, and began writing. Every word I could remember from that conversation. Every phrase. Their voices still echoed in my head, clear and precise. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I went to the attic and pulled down the old file box labeled legal. Inside, our marriage license. Marjorie's death certificate. The deed to the house. My pension paperwork. And an envelope marked, Will, Draft, 2008. The draft named Michael as sole heir. Of course it did. Back then, I couldn't imagine anyone else. I read through it once, twice, then set it aside. Suddenly, I began to see everything differently. The missed calls. The polite distance. The lack of an invitation. Not just neglect, but strategy. This wasn't just a son who had drifted. This was a man planning something. I thought about the power I still had, not in my hands, not in my fists, but in my pen. The very same pen I had planned to gift him. It sat unopened on the desk, ribbon still intact. I looked around the house that night, at the creaky floorboards, the worn couch Marjorie loved, the curtains she sewed by hand. This place was built with love. Every nail, every corner, every sacrifice. And he wanted to take it. He wanted to wait until I couldn't fight back. But I could. And I would. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But with clarity. And with a pen. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited a week before I saw him again. Part of me hoped, foolishly, that maybe he'd call. Maybe he'd remember Father's Day was coming. Maybe he'd feel a flicker of guilt, or doubt, or even love. Nothing came. So I made the trip again. This time, I didn't bring the pen. I didn't bring anything. Just my voice and a calm I had to practice in the mirror before I left. When he opened the door, he looked surprised, maybe even irritated. Dad? What are you doing here? I kept my voice steady. We need to talk. He stepped aside reluctantly, and I walked in. Stephanie wasn't home. The apartment was spotless. Modern. Cold. Like a showroom, not a home. He offered me nothing, no drink, no seat. Just stood by the counter, arms folded, waiting. I came by last week, I said quietly. Didn't knock. I heard you talking. He frowned. Talking? You and Stephanie. About me. About the house. His eyes shifted. Not in guilt, but in calculation. Look, Dad, if you're going to make this into something. I cut him off, gently but firmly. It's not what you said. It's how easily you said it. Like I was already gone. Like I was, nothing. He rolled his eyes and scoffed. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm finally reacting. He walked to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, like we were discussing the weather. Look, you're getting older. I'm just thinking ahead. If something happens, someone needs to take care of things. That's not betrayal, that's responsibility. You weren't planning to take care of things, I said, staring at him. You were planning to take everything. He looked at me then, really looked. And for a second, I thought I saw the boy I once knew. The boy who cried when he lost his first tooth. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. But then it was gone. What do you expect, Dad? He said sharply. You've lived in that house forever. Alone. No one to pass it to but me. And let's be honest, you're not getting any younger. I'm just being realistic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just let him speak. And the more he spoke, the more I saw the truth. He wasn't sorry. He didn't feel guilty. He believed he was entitled. You think because I raised you, I owe you something? I asked. He shrugged. Isn't that how it works? I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between us. Then I nodded. I used to think the same thing, I said. That if I loved you enough, sacrificed enough, gave you everything I had, you'd never forget where you came from. But I see now, I raised you to take. Not to care. He didn't respond. So I left. On the way home, I stopped by the corner store for bread. The owner, Samir, looked at me and said, "You okay, Mr. Weller? You look pale." I just smiled. Just tired. As I walked out, he added, "By the way, your son was here last week. Asking if you needed help with bills. Said you were struggling." I froze. He said that? Samir nodded. Wanted to know what kind of pension you were getting. Made it sound like he was worried about you. I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because it confirmed everything. Michael wasn't just waiting. He was laying the groundwork. I got home, closed the door, and sat at the kitchen table until the sun went down. Then I called Marjorie's lawyer. His name was Mr. Hartley. He used to bring cookies to our house when Michael was little. He sounded older now, slower, but just as sharp. "I think it's time we talk," I told him. "Is it about the will?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "And about what I want to happen if my son contests it." There was a pause. "Would you like to come in tomorrow?" "No," I said. "I'll come in Monday. I want to be sure I'm calm. That I'm doing this with a clear head." "Mr. Weller," he said softly, "this isn't an easy decision." "No," I agreed. "But it's the right one." The next morning, I went for a walk. My neighbor, Irene, waved from her porch. "You've got mail," she called. It was in my box by mistake. She handed me a plain white envelope. Inside, a glossy brochure for a senior living facility. High-end. Expensive. Smiling old people holding hands by fountains. No return address. No note. Just a business card, Stephanie Carr, real estate associate. It had her cell phone on it. I sat down on my porch and stared at the card for a long time. Then I laughed. Not bitter. Not angry. Just done. Truly, finally done. Let them think I'm old. Let them think I'm weak. Let them think I'll sign papers and go quietly. They were wrong. Because now, I had a plan. The office hadn't changed much in the last 20 years. Same leather chairs, same ticking wall clock, same scent of old books and lemon polish. Mr. Hartley stood when I entered, slower than I remembered, but still with that same calm, steady posture. He looked at me like he had when Marjorie passed, kindly, but with a weight behind his eyes. "Raymond," he said, reaching out. "It's been too long." I took his hand. "I should have come sooner. Guess I didn't think I'd need to." He nodded. "Most people don't. Until they do." He led me into his office and gestured for me to sit. There were photos of his grandchildren on the bookshelf now. Time had moved on. For him. For me. For all of us. "So," he said gently, "you're ready to update the will?" I took a deep breath, pulled a folded sheet of paper from my coat pocket, my own handwritten notes, scratched and revised over the last few days, and laid it on the table. "I need to take Michael out of it," I said. "Completely." Hartley didn't flinch. Just waited. "He's changed. I don't know when it started, or how I didn't see it. But I overheard him talking about, waiting me out. About the house. My money. It's not just a misunderstanding. He's planning around my death like it's a business deal." Hartley leaned back slightly. "That's hard to hear." I nodded. "It's harder to accept." He studied me for a long moment, then picked up a pen. "Do you want to name another heir?" "I want to leave everything to a foundation," I said. "Preferably one that helps veterans or youth. Something real. Something with purpose." "And if your son contests the will?" "I want a clause," I said firmly. "If anyone challenges it, everything goes to charity. No split. No compromise. No loopholes." Hartley raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" I didn't hesitate. He already tried to take everything. The moment he decided I was just a signature away from disappearing, he made his choice. Hartley nodded slowly. "I'll add the in terrorem clause. Contesting the will forfeits any claim. You understand that can cause a permanent rift?" "There's no permanent left," I said. He ended that at graduation. We went through the paperwork in quiet detail. He explained every section, every legal term. I listened, nodded, initialed. My hand trembled only once, when I signed the final page. Not from regret. From release. When it was done, he slid the signed document into a manila envelope and patted it once before filing it away. "I'll keep a notarized copy here and send one to you," he said. "And Ray, for what it's worth. I think you're doing the bravest thing a parent can do. Which is protecting your legacy from your own blood when they've forgotten what it was built on." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you." Outside, the sun was high. Warm. I walked slowly back to the station, the air feeling lighter around me. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the porch and watched the afternoon drift by. Children played down the street. A neighbor trimmed her hedges. A dog barked 2 blocks away. I thought about Marjorie. I pictured her sitting beside me, one leg tucked under her, holding a mug of tea. Her laugh. Her soft voice. The way she used to touch my shoulder when I'd get too quiet. I spoke out loud. "I'm sorry, Marge. I really tried." The wind stirred the trees, almost like a reply. I pulled out the original draft of the will, the one from 2008. The one that named Michael as sole heir. I read it one last time. Then I placed it in the fireplace, struck a match, and watched the flames erase what no longer belonged. I kept the pen, the one I was going to give him. Not to gift him anymore. But to remind me. It was never about punishment. Not really. It was about truth. And finally writing mine down. 3 weeks passed. The silence between us thickened like frost on glass, quiet, but sharp when touched. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, he showed up. No call. No warning. Just a knock at the door, loud and impatient. I opened it and there he stood, Michael, looking polished and professional in a blazer that probably cost more than my first car. Behind him, Stephanie leaned against her white SUV, sunglasses perched on her head, arms crossed like she was waiting for an Uber. "Hey, Dad," he said, forcing a smile. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly. He entered, looking around the living room like it was unfamiliar, like he was inspecting a rental. Stephanie stayed outside. He sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed, hands clasped. "I've been thinking," he began, "about everything. About you living here alone. It's a big house, Dad. Too big for one person." I said nothing. I talked to someone, just casually, nothing formal, about property management options. There's interest in this area. People would pay a lot for a place like this. I stared at him. "Is this a sales pitch?" He laughed awkwardly. No. Just, thinking ahead. Planning. Stephanie knows someone who can help ease you into a retirement community. They've got on-site medical staff, social activities. You'd be comfortable. Safe. Safe from what? I asked. He hesitated. From the burden of this place. From isolation. I let the silence stretch. He didn't fill it. He wasn't used to that. Then he pulled out a folder. Inside, a printed document. 4 pages. Legal. "Just look it over," he said. "It's a simple power of attorney. Nothing permanent, just gives me some flexibility to handle finances and property stuff if something were to happen to you." I didn't touch the paper. He slid it across the table toward me. "I already signed my part. Just needs yours." That's when I stood. And walked upstairs. Not a word. In the hallway closet, I unlocked the small fireproof box where I kept my most important documents. I pulled out 2 envelopes. One was the updated will from Mr. Hartley. The other was a copy of the recording transcript I'd written after overhearing their plans. I walked back down, placed them gently on the coffee table, and looked him square in the eyes. "Read them," I said. He looked confused at first. Then, as he opened the envelopes and began reading, that confusion twisted into something darker. "You changed the will," he said, voice rising. "I protected what your mother and I built." He stood abruptly. "You can't do this. I'm your only child. You're not my only legacy." His face flushed. "This is insane. You're punishing me for trying to help you?" "No," I said. "I'm saving this house from being turned into a bargaining chip. I'm saving your mother's memory from being auctioned off to the highest bidder. You made your intentions clear." He looked toward the door, then back at me. "Stephanie's going to be furious." "I'm not afraid of Stephanie." He stared at me, breathing heavy. "So that's it? You'd rather leave this place to strangers than to your own son?" I nodded slowly. "Strangers didn't ask me to disappear." His jaw tightened. "Fine," he muttered. He grabbed the folder, crumpled it, and stormed out. I followed him to the porch. Stephanie rolled her window down. "Well?" she asked. "She changed the will," he snapped. Stephanie gave me one cold glance. "We'll see about that," she muttered, then sped off. I stood on the porch for a long time, watching the dust settle behind their car. Inside, I placed the envelopes back in the lockbox. Then I made a fresh pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. But also, clean. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I hadn't lashed out. I had simply said no. It took me a lifetime to learn how. The invitation came from my sister's oldest daughter, Elena. A graduation party for her son, held at the community hall downtown. I almost didn't go. I wasn't in the mood to smile at relatives or make small talk with people who hadn't called me in years. But something told me to go anyway. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was defiance. Or maybe, deep down, I needed the family to see what Michael had become, not through my words, but through his actions. When I arrived, the place was buzzing. Kids running around in caps and gowns, grandparents balancing paper plates, music playing too loud through a borrowed speaker system. Elena hugged me hard and called me Uncle Ray, like she used to. Then I saw him. Michael. Standing near the refreshment table, drink in hand, Stephanie by his side like a shadow in heels. He didn't notice me at first. But when he did, his eyes narrowed. Not surprise. Not regret. Annoyance. I made my way toward the center of the room, where the small podium stood. Elena's husband was thanking guests, handing out small gifts. When he finished, he offered the mic to anyone with words for the graduates. I stepped up. The room quieted out of respect. Even Michael froze. I cleared my throat and began. I wasn't planning to speak tonight. But seeing so many young faces starting new chapters, it reminded me of promises we make. Not just to each other, but to ourselves. Eyes turned toward me. A few nods. A murmur of agreement. I raised a son, I continued. Alone, after his mother passed. I gave him everything I had. Not just money or food or shelter, but my name. My love. My life. Michael stiffened. I met his eyes. And recently, I discovered that my love had turned into expectation. My care into entitlement. My sacrifices into a silent ledger, one he assumed gave him the right to claim what I built, while I was still alive. Now the room was fully still. I reached into my coat and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. This is a copy of the revised legal will I filed last month. It removes my son from any inheritance, and redirects everything to a foundation in his mother's name. If anyone challenges it, the entire estate goes to charity. Gasps. Whispers. Some eyebrows raised in the back. Michael stepped forward, eyes wide, jaw clenched. What the hell are you doing? I'm telling the truth, I said calmly. Something you stopped doing a long time ago. Stephanie hissed, this is not the place. I looked at her. Then where is the place? Where do we talk about betrayal, when the betrayal happened over coffee tables and behind closed doors? Michael stepped up beside me now, red in the face. You think embarrassing me in public is some kind of moral victory? No, I said, lowering my voice. But hiding behind silence got me nowhere. I wanted the people who knew us, who watched me raise you, to understand why I did what I did. I turned to the room again. I am not doing this out of revenge. I'm doing it because trust, once broken, can't be inherited. It has to be earned. And my son, I looked at him again, softer now, chose not to earn it. Michael said nothing. Stephanie grabbed his arm and whispered something into his ear. He didn't move. I placed the envelope on the table. Anyone who wants to verify it can read it. It's public record now. Then I walked off the stage. No applause. Just silence. The heavy kind that settles after a hard truth is spoken. I left the party early. Walked out into the cool evening air, the sky turning purple above me. Behind me, I could still hear murmurs. Some voices raised. A few people calling my name. I didn't turn back. I walked down the sidewalk, each step lighter than the last. That night, I slept without waking. For the first time in weeks. Brain, do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quieter than usual the next morning, not just silent, but hollow. Not empty, but emptied. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee, the same way I had every morning for the last 30 years. Same chipped mug. Same chair. Same view of the backyard Marjorie had once turned into a haven of sunflowers and tomatoes. But something felt different. Lighter. There were no calls. No texts. No knocks on the door. Not from Michael. Not from Stephanie. Not from any of the relatives who'd heard me speak at the party. For the first time, I wasn't waiting. The silence wasn't lonely. It was clarity. I spent the day cleaning the house, not out of habit, but out of purpose. I dusted the bookshelves, folded Marjorie's old quilts, oiled the hinges on the back door. I even repotted the faded plant in the window that she'd always claimed was impossible to kill, though I had tried, inadvertently, many times. At one point, I found an old box in the attic. Inside were letters, some from Marjorie, some from Michael as a child. Crayon-scrawled messages that said, "I love you, Daddy," and "You're my hero." I didn't cry. But I did sit there for a while, just reading. The next few days brought small ripples from the town. Irene from next door dropped off banana bread and lingered on the porch longer than usual. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Some folks heard what happened at the party. You okay?" I nodded. "I'm better than I've been in a long time." She smiled. "You did what most folks wouldn't have the courage to." Samir, the store owner, waved me over the next time I passed by. "You know," he said, "my cousin left everything to his dog. People called him crazy. But he said, at least the dog never tried to lie to me." He laughed. So did I. Word spread, of course. Small towns thrive on stories. And mine became one of them. Some said I was bitter. Others said I was brave. I didn't bother correcting anyone. They could think what they wanted. I knew my truth now. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. Not a call. Not an email. A real letter. It was from Michael. The envelope had no return address. The handwriting was stiff, careful. I recognized it immediately. Inside, 2 pages. The first was defensive. He wrote about how he was just trying to protect the house, how Stephanie only wanted what was best, and how I had misunderstood everything. He said the party had been unfair and that I'd humiliated him. But the second page, near the bottom, shifted tone. It read, "I don't know when we started becoming strangers. Maybe it was when Mom died. Maybe it was when I got older. But I do remember loving you. I remember you teaching me how to ride a bike, how to fix a fuse, how to tell right from wrong. I'm sorry I forgot those things for a while." That was it. No apology for the will. No mention of the documents or Stephanie's role. Just that single sentence. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into Marjorie's old recipe box in the pantry. Not forgiven. But not forgotten. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the property. The garden beds were overgrown, but the soil was still rich. I pulled weeds until my back ached and my hands were raw. When I finished, I stood by the old bench beneath the maple tree where Marjorie used to sit and read. The sun was dipping behind the house, casting long shadows across the yard. And I realized something. This place didn't have to die with me. It could still become something more. Something good. Not for Michael. But for someone who needed it. The idea didn't come to me all at once. It arrived slowly, like the first breeze after a long heat wave. Quiet. Refreshing. And undeniable once it arrived. I was sitting at the diner one morning, nursing a black coffee and pretending to read the paper, when a familiar voice called out across the counter. "Mr. Weller?" I turned. It was Lily, the granddaughter of my old friend Henry. She was taller now, early 20s maybe, with bright eyes and that same kind, curious expression Henry always had. She used to come over when she was little, tagging along while Henry fixed things in the garage with me. "Lily," I said, surprised. "You're all grown up." She laughed and slid into the booth across from me like no time had passed. "I work with the local youth program now," she said. "We help at-risk teens, mentorship, tutoring, that kind of thing." I nodded. "That's good work." She tilted her head, curious. "You still live in that big old house by the field?" "Still standing," I said. Her eyes lit up. "Ever thought of using it for something? Like a study space? Or a drop-in spot? We don't have enough locations. The library's always full, and not every kid feels comfortable there." That's when it clicked. The house didn't need to sit in silence. It could serve. It could breathe. It could mean something again. By the time I walked home, the idea had taken root. That afternoon, I went into the guest rooms upstairs and opened every window. The air was stale, the curtains dusty, but the sunlight still poured in like it used to when Michael was young. I stood in the middle of the hallway and imagined it. Bookshelves along the walls. Tables where kids could work. A quiet room for reading. A bulletin board with schedules and pictures and hand-drawn notes. I grabbed a notebook and started writing. Room 1, study lounge. Room 2, quiet reading space. Room 3, counseling office. Kitchen, open during program hours. Porch, seating and shade for afternoon breaks. I worked for hours. Mapping. Measuring. Planning. The next day, I called Lily. "You were right," I told her. "This house shouldn't be wasted." By the end of the week, we had a meeting with the youth program director. They were eager, supportive, almost shocked by the offer. They said funding was tight, but I waved it off. I didn't need their money. I just needed their people. I called Mr. Hartley again. Had him draft a small addendum to the will, clarifying the house's purpose and setting up a modest trust to maintain it. "I want it protected," I told him. "Even after I'm gone." He smiled through the phone. "Marjorie would have loved this. I think she would have too." The next month was the most alive I'd felt in years. Lily came by twice a week with volunteers. We cleaned, sorted, painted. I cleared out closets, donated boxes of old clothes, and even let go of some of Marjorie's things, not out of pain, but with peace. I kept the ones that mattered. A few of the neighborhood kids started showing up early, curious. One of them, a quiet boy named Marcus, helped me carry shelves from the garage without being asked. He reminded me of Michael when he was 10, same watchful eyes, same slouched shoulders like he didn't want to take up space. "You like books?" I asked him once. He shrugged. "Sometimes." I handed him one of my old westerns. "Give this a shot. If you hate it, bring it back and tell me why." He took it. The next day, he came back and asked for another. Every night, after they left, I walked the halls of the house and listened. Not for footsteps or creaks, but for presence. For purpose. I didn't hear silence anymore. I heard echoes of new beginnings. The kind I could live for. The kind I could leave behind. The house filled up faster than I expected, not just with people, but with warmth. Within a month, the empty bedrooms were lined with books and beanbags. The old dining room table became a workbench for school projects. The kitchen counters saw more peanut butter sandwiches than I thought possible. And the front porch? That became the unofficial meeting spot for long talks and quiet afternoons. They came in all shapes, kids with too much to carry and nowhere to place it. Some loud, some closed off, some just needing somewhere still. A safe space. A place without judgment or expectations. They called me Mr. Ray. At first, it felt strange. But eventually, it felt like something deeper than Dad. Something chosen. Something earned. Marcus came back every week for a new book. He started asking questions. About characters. About endings. About why people in stories always change at the last minute. They don't, I told him once, handing him a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Sometimes they don't change at all. Sometimes you change. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he was letting on. There was a girl named Ella, too, sharp as a whip, always sketching in the margins of her notebooks. She once asked if she could draw a mural on the back fence. I told her yes without thinking. She painted a tree, stretching from the ground to the sky, with words carved into the trunk, "We grow here." I stared at it for a long time the day it was finished. Not all the kids were easy. Some came in angry. Suspicious. Too hurt to trust anything freely given. But I gave what I could. Time. Tea. A quiet ear. An extra jacket. A reminder that someone was watching, not to judge, but to care. The neighbors began noticing, too. Irene from next door brought muffins once a week. Samir donated snacks. Even Mr. Lewin from across the street, who hadn't said more than 5 words to me in 10 years, came by to help fix the back gate. One evening, I sat on the porch with 3 of the teens, Marcus, Ella, and another boy named Daryl. We passed around old photo albums from my garage. They pointed at pictures of Marjorie, of young Michael, of the house during simpler times. "You look kinda like a movie star in this one," Ella said, pointing to a photo of me in my 20s. "I'll take that compliment to the grave," I joked, and they all laughed. It felt real. It felt whole. And then, one Saturday, a knock at the door. I opened it to find a young woman, barely 20, maybe younger, standing there with her arms crossed and eyes nervous. "Hi," she said. "I'm Lily's cousin. My dad is Michael." I blinked. "You're?" "My name's Ava." She looked down, fidgeting with the sleeve of her hoodie. "I heard about the house." I didn't believe it at first. But then Lily showed me the mural. And I just wanted to see it. I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked through slowly, looking around like she was stepping through a story someone else had told her. After a while, she sat at the kitchen table and whispered, "He doesn't talk about you." My dad. But I found a box once, letters from Mom. Old photos. A recipe card with Raymond's favorite written in the corner. She paused. "I think he loved you. But I don't think he knew how to show it." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "He knew how once." She looked up, eyes glassy. "I just wanted to meet you." I made tea. We sat in quiet for a while. Before she left, she asked if she could come back. "Of course," I said. "This place isn't about who's related. It's about who shows up." She nodded. "I'll show up." After she left, I sat alone in the living room, Marjorie's blanket on my lap, and felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe. Maybe hope. That night, I walked through the hallway, each room filled with quiet hums of life. The smell of fresh paint. The scuff of sneakers. The low murmur of voices through closed doors. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a living thing. A second chance. A family, not by blood, but by bond. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, quiet, warm, the kind of day where everything feels settled. The kids had just left for the weekend, and I was sitting on the porch with a glass of lemonade, watching the breeze roll through the maple trees. I had the radio playing some old Sinatra, low enough not to bother anyone, just loud enough to fill the silence. That's when I saw the car pull up. Sleek. Silver. Too polished for our old street. I didn't move. I just watched as Michael stepped out. He was dressed plainly, no blazer, no tie. Just jeans and a wrinkled shirt. His hair was longer than usual, his face thinner. There were bags under his eyes. But he still moved like someone who expected doors to open for him. He stood there at the bottom of the porch steps for a long time. I didn't say anything. Finally, he climbed the first step, then the second, and stopped. "Hi, Dad." I nodded. "Michael." He glanced around, at the porch chairs, the fresh paint, the flowers planted by the walkway. "Place looks different. It feels different." He looked down. Shifted his weight. "I didn't come here to argue." "Good," I said. "I'm too old for arguments." He half laughed at that, but it died in his throat. "I heard about what you're doing here. The kids. The program. You hear from Ava?" He blinked, surprised. "She came?" "She did." He nodded slowly. "She's a good kid." "She is." There was a long silence. Then he said, "I was angry. About the will. About everything. But I read your letter. Anne. I get it now." I looked at him carefully. "Do you?" He nodded again, slower this time. "I thought you owed me something. Like your life belonged to me after everything you gave up. I didn't realize, you already gave it. Every day. Every night. Every dollar. And I just expected more." "You didn't just expect it," I said. "You planned for it. Behind my back." He didn't argue. Didn't deny it. "I was stupid," he said softly. "Selfish. I let Stephanie talk me into a version of success that didn't include you." I looked out at the yard, the maple tree, the fence with Ella's mural. Then back at him. "I don't hate you," I said. He looked at me quickly, surprised. "But I can't pretend we're the same people anymore," I continued. "Something broke, Michael. Something I can't glue back together just because you came to the porch." He looked away, blinking fast. "I'm not asking for the house," he said. "I'm not asking for anything." "Good," I replied. "Because it's not yours to ask for." He let that sit. Then he said, "I just wanted to say. I'm sorry. Not because I want something. But because I lost something. And I don't know if I can ever get it back." "You can't," I said. "Not all of it. But," I added, "you can try to build something new. That's what I'm doing." He nodded. After a moment, he looked at the empty chair beside me. "May I?" I hesitated. Then I gestured to it. He sat down, slowly. We didn't speak much after that. We watched the breeze move through the trees. We listened to the soft hum of a house no longer dying. And for a moment, just a brief, fragile moment, it almost felt like we weren't broken beyond repair. Almost. When he finally stood, he said, "I'm glad you're doing something that matters." "I always was," I said. "You just stopped noticing." He looked at me with something close to regret. Then he walked down the steps, back to his car, and drove away without another word. I sat there a long time after he left. Did I forgive him? Not yet. Maybe never fully. But I saw him. Not the man he became out of pride or ambition. But the boy I once held after his first nightmare. The boy who used to whisper, "Don't leave, Daddy." That boy was still in there somewhere. And maybe, one day, he'd find his way home. Speech balloon. Have you ever had to choose between peace and family? Share your story in the comments. The ribbon was nothing fancy. Just a strip of red fabric I found in Marjorie's sewing box, ironed smooth and tied across the front gate. But as I stood there with the scissors in hand, surrounded by the sounds of chatter and laughter, it felt like I was cutting through more than fabric. I was cutting through grief. Through silence. Through the years of waiting for something to return that never would. The front yard was filled with neighbors, volunteers, and a few of the teens who now called this house a second home. Lily stood beside me, holding a clipboard and wearing a smile that could have lit the whole street. Marcus hovered near the porch steps, trying not to look nervous as he passed out lemonade cups. Ella was showing her mural to a group of younger kids, pointing out the tree, the words, the way the roots tangled into names of people who had helped build this place. When I snipped the ribbon, there wasn't applause, just a warm hum of cheers, claps, laughter. It was more than enough. Inside, the rooms had been transformed. What was once Michael's bedroom now held 2 long desks and a small whiteboard where tutoring sessions happened 3 nights a week. Marjorie's old reading nook had become a soft space with beanbags and donated books. The dining room had been refitted with mismatched chairs and tables for project nights. On the hallway wall hung a framed sign, "Marjorie's House, a place to grow." It was Lily's idea. I couldn't speak when she first showed it to me. But now, as people walked past it and nodded or smiled, I felt Marjorie's presence in every creak of the floorboards. After the crowd thinned and the sun began to sink behind the rooftops, I made myself a cup of tea and walked to the backyard. The garden beds had been replanted, flowers and vegetables this time. The kids had insisted on both. A row of sunflowers stood proud at the back fence. A few tomato vines clung stubbornly to the trellis I'd rebuilt. I sat on the bench beneath the maple tree, the same bench where I used to sit with Michael on warm nights long ago. Only this time, I wasn't waiting for someone to come home. I was already there. I took out the old Nikon camera, Marjorie's camera, and snapped a photo of the house bathed in golden light. Then I turned it toward the porch, where Marcus and Ella were still talking quietly. One photo at a time, I captured the family I'd found, not bound by blood, but by care, effort, presence. The kind of family that shows up. That gives back. That doesn't wait until the will is written to decide what you're worth. As I stood, a breeze moved through the trees. A soft hush, almost like a voice. I closed my eyes. "See, Marge?" I whispered. It wasn't all for nothing. The next morning, I wrote a letter. Not to Michael. Not to the foundation. Just something for the house. I folded it and placed it inside a small tin box, then buried it beneath the garden's biggest sunflower. Inside, it read: "To whoever finds this one day, this house was built with hands that worked hard, a heart that hurt deeply, and a hope that never gave up. It isn't valuable because of its size or structure. It's valuable because of what it gave. And who it gave to. Take care of it. Let it keep giving. And remember, love is a choice we make every day, not something we inherit by name." As I covered the tin with soil and patted it down, I didn't cry. I just smiled. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man who'd been betrayed. I felt like a man who'd survived. Who'd chosen peace over pride. And planted something stronger than bitterness. Something that could grow. Because in the end, this was never just my house. It was always Marjorie's. And now, it belongs to everyone she would have loved.